What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Relentless Runners podcast. You are listening to episode 30. I am your co-host, Christine, Toni, and we are the co-founders of Relentless Runners. We are an online run coaching team that provides one-on-one run coaching with a team of over 10 coaches, a registered dietitian, a strength and conditioning coach, and a clinical psychologist who teaches our athletes about mindset. We started this podcast to bring you our running knowledge so you can follow, learn, and grow as a runner.
And today we are going to be talking about carbon plated shoes. I don't know where we came up with this idea, but I'm excited to talk about it just because it's a common topic that we have conversations with our athletes on benefits of them, how to introduce them into their rotation as they're getting ready for their races. So we're going to cover different things from like the history of the carbon fiber plated shoe, what they are exactly. So those of you who are like, I don't know what that is, we got you too. We're going to talk about just again, like benefits of them, how they can increase your performance. We're going to note some like studies that we were doing some reading on, and I'm excited to talk about those because we found some like really interesting stuff. And then also just things to like be cautious of. We'll also share some tips and advice on if you do want to add them into your rotation, how to like introduce them to your running so that way body is responding well and you get the most out of them on race day. But I'm excited to dive in today. They're so expensive and fancy, but they're fun shoes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, why don't you start us off by just telling everyone what is a carbon fiber plated shoe?
Sure. And just to note, we're not doing Corral Chronicles today because we're honoring time. We're short on time today. So obviously this is more important than us talking about ourselves. But okay, so what are carbon fiber plated shoes? So they are shoes that have a thin, curved carbon fiber plate that's basically sandwiched between the midsole's foam. So the goal of these shoes is to just enhance your running efficiency. And we are going to talk more into detail about like what that means exactly. And then also in turn, that can help boost your performance. But in terms of like what carbon fiber is, which that may or may not be like a new like term for you, it's basically lightweight, it's stiff and it's strong, but a ton of brands have adopted including carbon fiber into their performance shoes. And when we say performance shoes, we're basically talking about a lightweight shoe that you can use on race day. So like if you have a 5K, 10K, half or full, these types of shoes are going to be more geared towards like that type of day, like race day itself. Again, a ton of brands have adopted including this into their shoes. So there's a couple different ways though that the different companies have incorporated it. So some have just done a full carbon fiber plate. Saucony has incorporated something called a slotted carbon plate. And basically that's going to be in the Saucony Endorphin Elite. So they have two different racing shoes, the Elite and the Pro. So the Elite is the one that has basically it's like a full plate. And then at the very end, it's like little toes, like from the forefoot on, it'll kind of separate into four different like little sections. But what that does is it helps with like the flexibility because the carbon fiber plate is really like stiff and firm. So that just gives you a little bit more flexibility. And then other ways, Adidas, for the Adidas Adios Pro, they actually use carbon rods. So it's like rods literally like through the shoe in the middle between the foam. But the whole goal of that is to, again, have some flexibility and to help mimic the metatarsals of the foot. So it's really interesting how the companies have like tried to incorporate it in different ways. But yeah, it's like it's really cool. I've only tried the Elite and then the Nike Vaporfly. What carbon shoes have you used, Christine?
The only ones I've ever tried are the Nike. I had like the OG Vaporflies from like 2018 era.
Those are
that
my
kind
favorite
of when they
look
first
ones. Yeah, the like the teal and the orange.
Yes, I have those ones. And then the ones that I have now are the Vaporfly 4s, I think.
Yeah.
But I think what I might try because if you guys have been listening, I don't always agree with Nike, or Nike's shoes don't agree with me. Let's say that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. My body doesn't always respond well to Nike.
Yeah.
So I was thinking of I love the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4. It's my speed shoe. and I was thinking I'm going to do one of their racing shoes for my next marathon. And it's interesting because I did not know the difference. I did not realize one was slotted carbon plates and one was a full plate. So that's really interesting. And that just leaves me with more decisions now. So
Yeah,
like
and
which
for
one I
those
would
who
want to do.
don't know, yeah, because then for those who don't know too, so the Saucony Endorphin Speed is a plated shoe, but it's a nylon plate, and the nylon plate is just like it's a plate that's going to help. It's like similar concept, but it's just like a lot more flexible, so people can the shoe will last like longer, but it's a little bit kinder on your body too. So it's a great option if you want something to give you a little oomph during your workout, but also isn't as like firm as that carbon plate. But yeah, those are,
Yeah.
you should just try them on. Like, I know it's very expensive to be like, I'm just going to order these and try them on because it's like, oh, it's so much. But you are returning one, but you could always try them on and see what you like if they're not in like
Which
a
one?
local
Yeah.
store. The elite, yeah, the elite and the pro.
I
But
will have to try. I feel like some of
yeah.
the stores don't always have the different kinds
Yes.
of racing shoes in your
Yeah.
size in
Yep.
stock.
Yep.
Because that was a problem that I had when I was trying to find the Nikes that I found
You're
for
right.
Houston. And
Yep.
I also did not give myself that much time to find this. So that was on me. But it was like none of the stores had, that's why I ended up going with Nike because I really didn't have many other options with the time that I gave myself to find a racing shoe. So, you know, had I given myself more time, but I couldn't just walk into the store and try it on. They just didn't have it in stock. So
yeah,
that might be harder.
No,
but
for sure.
anyways, carry on.
Okay, so next thing I'm going to talk about is the history of the carbon plated running shoes. And I was texting Christine because I was like geeking out over this because I absolutely had no idea. And we'll talk more again. We'll share some more like insight in between, insight behind like when the shoes actually became really popular, which was like 2017. So Christine will talk about that. But actually, they've been around longer than we thought. So back in 1989, Brooks, which shocked that this was Brooks, but okay, Brooks. But Brooks released a shoe called the Fusion and Fission, which both incorporated a carbon fiber plate sandwiched between the midsole foam and the outsole rubber. And then Fila released a carbon fiber racing shoe in the 90s. And then Adidas created a curved and shaped carbon plate called the Pro Plate. And that technology was present in a shoe worn by Haley Gebrselassie, and she set the world record in the marathon in 2007. So that actually is the meat and potatoes of like where it originated from. But in 2017, that's when it became a lot more present. So Nike came out with like this huge shoe launch and released the Vaporflies, which many of us are familiar with. And then so people tend to think that Nike was the one that first created the carbon plated shoe, but they didn't. But they are really good at marketing. And I think that because, you know, because of the Breaking Two project with Kipchoge, which that was like such a, I still love that, like documentary, I guess you would call it. But he was wearing those shoes on during that project, and it got him really close to the sub 2 hour marathon. And I think they did the Breaking Two. Didn't they do Breaking Two again? And he did hit 159. I don't know if he was wearing the Vaporflies or the Alpha Flies at that time, but yeah, it's super cool. Yeah, it's just interesting on hearing or reading about the history with that. But in
either way, he had carbon plated shoes on.
Either way,
from Nike.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, either way.
Yep. Yeah. But before we get into the science, I guess Christine, how about you share with us just like if the shoes are legal, because there are, I don't know if everyone knows this, but there are things that elite runners have to be mindful of when it comes to their racing shoes. So how about you talk about that and then get into like how they benefit people to run faster?
Okay. So you'll hear some people say, are wearing carbon plated shoes considered cheating? Or are they even legal in the racing world where they're actually racing for money? Not just like you and I, but the elites, right? So the World Athletics had determined that as long as the shoe stack height is 40 millimeters or less, then they are permitted to be raced in. So the 40 millimeters is the stack from the heel to the toe, and like how much that drop is. We always talk about the drop. So 40 millimeters is a lot. Like you got to, if you've ever tried on these carbon plated shoes, like I almost feel like I'm on pogo sticks sometimes. Like that's where it's like it forward leans you, but then it also has because it has such a high stack. So anyways, as long as it's 40 millimeters or less, they are technically legal and everyone has access to it. That's the other thing is like everyone
I was
has to
just
be able
gonna
to have
say,
access to these different shoes. Because I remember there was something, and I did not confirm this with like research before this, but if I recall, an elite could not race in it if it wasn't on the shelves for everybody to have access to, if I
yeah, I
remember
thought so
correctly.
too. Wasn't it when they first came out with the original Alpha Fly? Do you remember when we were at Atlanta for the trials?
Mm-hmm.
What year was that? 2020, duh.
Yep.
But we were at Atlanta for the trials, and Nike gave like all the people that were running in the trials, like they had the Alpha Fly that they had released. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Didn't they gave everyone was able to wear that shoe for the trials, but wasn't the stack height like 40 or like over 40 or something with the original one? I just thought that there was an issue with that, but I could be off.
I remember there was some sort of controversy. I don't remember specifically what it was, but one of the things I do remember is that, do you remember, because we both spectated the trials in Atlanta that
Yeah,
year, and I remember seeing a lot of people coloring or covering the Nike symbols on the shoes. It's like people didn't want to be, I don't know what that was. It was like they didn't want, I don't know if
maybe
there
they
was
had a
something with like
sponsor.
the
Well, if they had a
rules,
shoe if they have a
but there
shoe
was like a lot of
sponsor,
people doing it though. It was
but
like
if
they
they
wanted to be in the shoe, but yeah,
yeah,
maybe they were sponsored by
if
somebody else.
or even if like the sponsor, yeah, doesn't, I don't know if there's some, it has to be like
Can't
something
have
like
like
that.
a,
They either don't like Nike and they don't want the shoe like or the brand like flashed that they're wearing it, or it could have been something like that where it's like legally
yeah,
they're
couldn't
not
have another
allowed to,
logo.
yeah, like
I
not
just
allowed to or
remember
something.
seeing that a lot though. It
That's
wasn't
crazy.
just
I
like
forgot
one or
about
two
that.
people. It was just
Yeah.
like everybody's coloring over the Nike swoosh. Like nobody,
So
I don't know, so weird.
wild. Yeah,
I
that
don't know
was
what that
wild
was
though.
about. But either
Yeah.
way, it is. And then like, so that's part of like, is it even considered legal? Then you have other people like, recreational runners like us who are like, people think like, oh, well, that's cheating. And it's like, well, no, it's not. It's just an advance in technology.
Yep.
I mean, are you gonna run barefooted because shoes are an advancement in technology? This is just another step in better shoes, like, right? Like, do you wear a watch that helps pace you? Do you wear all these things that help make your life easier? Like, it's not
Mm-hmm.
cheating. It's not
Yeah.
like we're running around on pogo sticks. Like, it's a shoe. It's been all determined. Everybody can be on the same playing level if you want to be. It's a choice of yours
Mm-hmm.
or not. Like, I get like people say it's cheating. I'm like, it's not. It's just a new thing, and I mean, they're cool. If your body agrees with it, they're pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
Anyways,
agree. They're fun.
I digress.
Super fun.
They are
I
fun.
digress.
I digress. All right, moving on. So the science behind the carbon plated shoes and how they work and how they help you and your body run faster. And then we'll talk about some performance benefits. So there's three main components of what make these shoes so super, as people call them, like the super shoes. The first one is the foam. The second part of it is the carbon plate shape and position. And like Toni you already kind of talked about, like, is it slotted? Is it rotted? Is it full? Like there's different components of that. And then the third is the rocker geometry and the eccentric loading. So how I was talking about, it's kind of propelling you forward. So the magic of these shoes is really in that super foam. So which has evolved a lot over the years. So most running shoes used to use the EVA, which I might mispronounce some of these fancy words, but the ethylene vinyl acetate. Then in 2013, the Adidas Boost made TPU, which is a thermoplastic polyurethane that became popular with the Adidas Boost. I remember that boom with
Yeah,
the
me too.
Adidas
Yep.
Boost.
Yep.
And then in 2017, Nike's Vaporfly made the PEBA, which is the polyether block amide, which is the state of the art type of foam. I probably said something wrong. It's very possible.
Don't stress yourself.
What did I
out
say?
with it. Oh no! I think you said it right. I would not. I was
Oh.
laughing to myself because I'm like, I don't know how to say that at all.
Well, we'll go with it. So there was a study published in PubMed that found that the energy return for the EVA, so that one that was used to be used a lot about like a decade ago plus, had a 66% return on energy. So for the EVA, the TPU, which was the Adidas one that came out shortly after in 2013, had a 76% energy return. Then the one that Nike came out with, the Vaporflies, had an 87% return. That's a 20% difference in energy given back to you to use, or to not waste, rather, from the EVA foam to the PEBA foam. So that 20% energy back is huge. And every time you're stepping, that's going to add up a lot over energy saved throughout the run, which creates this ability to be more efficient. We'll talk about running economy in a second, but basically being able to run at a faster pace for a more prolonged period of time without as much energy being used, which
I even
is what we want.
remember when James was doing our team call like months ago about shoes. I just
Yeah.
remember him talking about we weren't talking about carbon plated shoes, but just the
The
different
foam.
cushioning technology in the different shoes. And he was saying like that's why he's actually not the biggest fan of Brooks, is just because the type of cushioning that they use, like there's not a lot of energy return. I think he was talking about the Piba like foam and saying that that was I don't know if like more companies than Nike use that, but that would be an interesting thing. Like now I want to look at because I don't know what type that like Saucony uses, for example. Like now I want to look at shoes and maybe everybody look at their shoes
I'd
and see what
be,
type of foam
I
is in there.
can't, yeah, and I can't remember, but he's a very big Saucony fan, and being a Saucony rep, and then he was a very big proponent of Saucony and the foam that they use in Saucony. So it's probably the state of the art one, but we can
Mm-hmm.
confirm that and look back on that. But
Yeah.
yeah. So anyways, pretty cool stuff, right? So the combination of the carbon plate and then the foam that they use, that's what gives you back that energy return to you as you're running, the more that you move. So then that makes you more economical. It gives you better running economy, which you probably hear all the time. So that's basically our metabolic, our cardiovascular, our biomechanical, respiratory, and neuromuscular efficiency during running. So like how good are we running? How efficient is our body at running and moving through space, pressing through time, through like the ground and getting that return back. So if you have better running economy, it can make you faster because you're not wasting as much energy over the span of your entire race, no matter the distance. Also, these shoes have also been known to reduce muscle fatigue. So your muscles are just not getting as tired because it's not wasting as much energy through your form and through your gait and through the energy that their shoes are giving back to you. So
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool stuff.
Sweet. Knowledge bombs.
Yeah. Knowledge bombs dropped. All right, performance benefits, more coming at you. So I'm going to throw a couple different studies at you just to kind of show you, because I know some of the questions that and some of the arguments that I've seen people come out with is like, well, these shoes are only going to benefit you if you're running faster than like a 7-minute pace. And people have come flat out and said that. So there's actually studies that have been done to compare the different groups of paces to see what type of percentage their performance is enhanced by using these shoes. So the first one, Jobert performed a study back in 2021 with a small group of athletes who had 5K PRs of roughly 16 minutes. So they ran at a 6-minute mile pace for 5-minute segments, both in a carbon plated shoes and then in a non-plated shoe. So just like a regular trainer. And what this study concluded was that their running economy, so all the things that we just talked about, being more efficient at running with less energy being used, their running economy increased by 2.5%. There was another study in 2023, Jobert published, that looked at the impact of runners who ran slower than that initial control group. So he tested those who ran between an 8 to 10-minute mile. And by the way, we're not calling that slow. We all pretty much run at
Pretty
that effort.
normal.
We're just saying,
Yeah.
right, very, very normal. But when you compare it to a 6-minute mile, we're just using the term slower just for the use of numbers here. But so anyways, I just wanted to call that out so nobody feels like we're attacking them. But this study concluded that the carbon plated shoes still did benefit to those who ran slower than that initial control group. So those who ran an 8-minute pace, their running economy improved by 1.4%. And those who ran in the 10-minute pace, their running economy improved by a little less than 1%. So basically, when you lay that all out, the faster they are running, the more energy return they are receiving from these shoes, the more running economy is being increased. But that's not to say that those who are running slower are not receiving any sort of benefit from these shoes at all, which is pretty cool to see. So that kind of debunks that myth of you have to be running that faster.
Yeah, I was glad that he did the two different studies too for that reason, because I think sometimes just like when you think of like other studies, like I always think about, when you hear the conversation around cadence and then having the having understood that that came to be because of studies being on elite runners. It's like, okay, well, how does that correlate to us normos that are out here running that aren't elite runners or even like
Right.
sub elite category? Like we're the majority. So, like, how does it impact us? So, I was glad that he did something a little bit later. And I also thought it was interesting because when we were looking this stuff up, in my mind, I thought that a lot of the research that I was going to see was going to be on like performance in terms of like racing and like time. So like racing a 5K in a normal trainer and then like 4 weeks later racing in a carbon plated shoe. But a lot of these were done on like running economy, which like obviously makes more sense because it does translate to performance. But that was something that I just like wasn't expecting when like reading up on it, which was cool. But
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
go
that's
on.
cool.
I know you have like another study you wanted to talk about.
So the last study was in 2023, and it compared the difference in performance while wearing carbon-plated shoes between Kenyan world-class runners and amateur male runners. So it wanted to compare the difference between those two types of groups. And in the amateur runners, the amateur athletes are like the majority of all of us normos, as you called them, the performance the performance outcome varied from a 9.7 increase in performance to a 1.1% decline in performance, which I thought that one was really interesting.
Wow.
So basically, it's saying that everyone is different and there are outliers, meaning you are not guaranteed to have a performance enhancement with using a super shoe. Some people actually went the other way. So there are outliers to everything, but I just thought that was interesting and something worth calling out.
You know, that makes me reminds me of, I told you that I've been reading the book. Like I started reading the Matt Fitzgerald books. And I'm starting like I'm familiar with the 80-20 method. I implement that and I've like read about it, but I haven't read his books on it yet. So I started with he has the 80-20 running. And then he has the 80-20 endurance, which I know you read, and that one's more geared towards coaches. So I'm going to do that one next. But in the 80-20 running, and I can't remember, I know that I was talking to my one athlete about this because it was like interesting, but he has this one section that he talks about like form. And there was a lot of studies that he was referencing that when like there was like control groups and they have like in this one study, I forget how many people were in it. But he had the group like run and then they measured their running economy. And then they implemented like they had this control group do a 12-week program working on their form. So like let's say they wanted them to work on cadence or they wanted them to work on like forward lean or something. So like they implemented something to work on over the span of the 12 weeks. When they went to go test this group again, their running economy actually declined. And like the whole concept of what he was talking about in this one like chapter. And there was like a bunch of different studies, even like non-runners. It was like endurance athletes where that happened, where it's like when you kind of force your body to move in a certain way, it's actually most of the time it's like not making you more efficient. So like, which I found like fascinating just because the form technically like looks better, it doesn't necessarily correlate and mean that you as an individual are running more efficiently. And that's what reminds me of the shoes, because like the shoes are technically making like these people more economical, like in theory, but like in actuality, that may not be the case where it's not benefiting. It's like forcing their body to move in a different way that's not making them as economical. But that was just, I was like, oh my God, it's like these two things merging that we're talking about. So that's like so
that
interesting.
is really cool. Yeah, that's very interesting. And it's kind of like there's so many things that could apply to when it comes to running. Like, oh, you have to hit 180 steps per minute for your cadence. It's like, no, you don't.
And
like that doesn't necessarily mean that's good for you.
Yeah, Mo Farah, he said his cadence is 160.
It always annoys me when people do that, when they're like, you have to hit 180. It's like, no, you don't. Stop saying that.
Stop it. I know. Yeah. Geeking out. Okay. Let's get into just conversation around links to injuries, things to be cautious of. I'm excited. I'm glad that we're talking about this too, just because I know, and this is why I know, Christine, you're like, I think you'd be good to talk about this because I've had my own personal experience of like just wearing these shoes on race day and implementing them in my training more. So I can like speak to that in a second. But first I'll go through like what I have here. So allegedly, like as of right now, there's actually no studies that come to the conclusion that carbon plated shoes or super shoes lead to injury. But there are some things to still keep in mind. So I was reading this one article in Outside Magazine, and Amol Saxena is a sports podiatrist from Palo Alto, who claims that an issue runners may face with carbon plated shoes is not that the foot is individualized, and he or she like said this. The issue is that the foot is individualized and the carbon plate is not. So they go on to say that if the shape or length of your metatarsals line up differently than where they're supposed to, like on the carbon plate, like within the shoe, or if you don't have like a flexible plantar fascia, it can lead to stress on those areas. And then also that super shoes can alter your form, which can lead to stress on the joints and just areas that aren't used to being stressed, to put simply. So just it's important to pay attention to how your body responds to wearing them. And we'll share some advice like later on how you can introduce them and stuff. But one thing I will say is when I was training for a half marathon a couple years ago, I wore the speed. So I had this speed. I think it was the 2 at the time that I was wearing them for my workouts and like long run workouts. I never wore a carbon plated shoe. And then when I got my race day shoe, which was the Nike Vaporfly, what I did for that was like introduce it a little bit before my race. I wore them for 1 or 2 long run workouts, and then that was it. I saved them for race day and I was fine. When I was training for my half marathon, which was my next training cycle, that's when I had, because I just went on a frenzy. And I got another pair. I think I got them on sale maybe. And I wore them for track workouts or like the speed portion of my track workouts. Or my speed workout during the week. I wouldn't wear them for my long run workouts though. I would still wear my speed 3 then. And my body felt like shit after I would wear them. And then I started having more issues, just like little like niggles that like would go away, but there was just like more stuff that would like pop up when I would wear them. So personally, like I do know people who wear them more often, but my body didn't respond to wearing them more often into training. So before I had to stop things because of my ankle with like our grandma's build, like I was like, I'm not wearing carbon plated shoes until like I'm getting ready to test things out for a race. And I almost was considering not wearing one at all for that race. But yeah, so I don't know what your experience was like. I feel like you haven't worn them for workouts, or did you? No.
Well, my first experience, well, no, I had the Vaporflies from, like I said, years ago that I would wear in like 5Ks.
Yeah.
And I always would feel like oddly sore a couple days after like the 5K, but it was never anything serious. My bigger experience with them was for my half marathon back in January at Houston when I had gotten them. But like I said, I didn't plan very well, and I got them within like the last 2 weeks of training. So I did take them out for a workout before, and it was on the track. I think it was like 800s.
Yeah.
It may not have been, it may have actually been on the road because it would have been dead of winter, which meant my track was a black hole again.
You were not running in the black hole.
No, it was I was probably on the road, but regardless, I wore the Vaporflies just for the workout part of it, and everything felt great. No soreness or anything. And then I wore them for the race. And I still feel that me wearing those, in addition to just like the concrete of the route of Houston combined, is what strained my hamstring, because it was like I was fine until that day. And that's why. So I probably didn't introduce them.
Though.
I really do. I fully believe it was the carbon plated shoes and the cement roads versus pavement, and that's like one of the things I'm actually kind of nervous about by doing the full.
Yeah, because I know even from running around here, from like living in the city, like I know when I'm running certain routes that have like when I'm on the concrete a lot more, like I'll just like notice it a little bit like later on that day where I'm like, oh yeah, I did a long run and I was like on the concrete like more often than not. And when you think about it, like we were talking about, the carbon fiber plate is like it's like hard on your body. Like it's absolutely harder on your body. So that coupled with the, what's it called? Makes
the
a lot of
harder
sense.
ground. And that's why I stay off sidewalks too.
Yeah. If you
aside
guys are
from
ever able
tripping
to mix
and,
it up,
eating it, but
if you if you guys are able to like mix it up, if that's like possible to you, like definitely try to do that, because
and
concrete is like
safe.
the absolute
Yeah.
hardest surface that you could be on, and that over time, like you may not notice it like right away, but over time like your body notices it. But again, that's where it's like you have the speed, like that's a great option that it gives you a little like pep in your step, but it's not going to be as hard on your body, so you could always do something like that for Houston.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see.
I would like veer caution to is wearing them too often, just because it takes away the specialness of the shoe. And I think that I even kind of felt myself feel this way, and like no runner will actually want to admit this, but like you do become reliant on the shoe to in order to feel like you can perform. So I from wearing a carbon plated shoe during like track workouts, like there was after that there was always like moments in my head where it's like, man, well, if I don't wear these shoes, like am I not going to hit like these specific paces, like
Mm,
and I think
yeah.
that it takes away the like confidence in what you can actually do, because even though, right, it's like we're the ones that are doing the training, like it's absolutely like possible, but I think that there is a little bit of a reliance there, so just
Yeah.
something to like be cautious of. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
anything else that you would add to that?
I would just agree with everything you're saying. Like, I do not recommend wearing carbon plated shoes for workouts. Like,
Yeah.
I would save it for a race day, and I would do something that is gentler on the body. Like we were talking about the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4s, they use the nylon plate. It's not as harsh on the body, and it's also not as responsive as like the performance increase that like the carbon plated shoes will give you. And it's like, it kind of gives you that confidence. Like, I've really only ever worn my carbon plated shoes for races, 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathon,
Mhm.
and I don't wear them in workouts. And when I put them on, I call them my superpower shoes, and my kids think they're like I'm a superhero. It's like that's how I feel, because it's like they do give you that sense of like, oh, I've got a boost in me. But
Mhm.
like, yeah, if you're wearing them all the time, not only does that, it can get mental, but it's also not good for your body. Like people have said like it's not good for your body to be in carbon plated shoes all the time. Like you shouldn't be walking
Mhm.
around in them. You shouldn't. I mean, they're expensive too. You wouldn't want to do
Yeah.
that anyways,
And I
but
know
yeah.
yeah. I know a lot of people too like to like when the shoe is like quote unquote retired, and I won't get into that because I know you're going to talk about how they last like next after I talk about adding them in your rotation, but I know a lot of people like once the quote unquote shoe is retired, that's when they then transition them into shoes to use for workouts. I don't like that because the shoe's retired for a reason. I know a lot of
Oh,
people, and I've
I
seen
would
people
not do
recommend
that.
this. Yeah,
What?
because the cushioning is like broken down. And that we all know, like when your normal trainer, when the cushioning and stuff is broken down, like it's not doing what it's supposed to, in order to like
Yeah.
help like with shock absorption and everything. So just like please don't do
I
that.
would
But
not I would not do that. Yeah.
yeah, but
Interesting.
when it comes to adding them into your rotation, just to like mitigate risk of injury, you want to introduce them slowly. So you can start by, and this may be a little bit of a pain in the butt to do it this way, but I think it's like if you're talking about the best way to do it, if you are doing strides, add them into a day that you have strides, wear your normal trainers, swap into your shoes that you can do your strides in, get a feel for what they feel like for those like quick like bouts of like running. From there, what you can do is add them into the second half of a speed workout, for example. It could be easier if you're doing a track workout, because everything can kind of be right there if you're not like running to the place. But even if you're doing again like a road workout, like stop at your car, like kind of like allow yourself to be chill that day, where it's like, okay, gonna go back to my car, change into these shoes, and then wear them for either the speed portion of the workout, or you can even be even gentler with it and do like the like second half of the workout. From there you can do the whole workout, and then I do think it's important to incorporate them into like one or two like long runs, if you have pace work like in those long runs, even better, just so you can get a feel for what it's like to run at like race pace. And then after that, just like hang them up and save them for race day. You don't want to do like wear them too much like going into the race day, so that way they're at their like prime when it comes to having that pop that you really want.
And that's a good segue into, well, how long do these shoes last? Because if you are using them too much in the training cycle itself, are they really going to be at their prime come race day? Or how do you know when they're done and it's time to retire them? So as we were just talking about, the start that we were all most aware of was of these types of shoes was in 2017 with the Nike Vapor Flies. And again, it used the carbon plate and the foam combined together that promised that better economy but with lower durability. And that's really why you get this magic in this like super shoe, but because of what it gives you, there's lower durability to it, so they wear out faster, but they're
Yeah.
really expensive. Like these are expensive
Mhm.
shoes.
Yeah.
So when they kind of started, like that unsourced number that kept being thrown around was 100 miles. You get 100 miles out of these Vaporflies before they are worn down, and the return starts to diminish with that energy that is given back and what we were talking about before. So as if you remember the different types of foams that are used across different brands, that is going to, and the design around them with like the brand design, the carbon plate design, shape, all of it is all going to be different in terms of the durability and how many miles you can essentially get out of them before you have to retire them. So there isn't a magic number, I guess you could say, to when a super shoe needs to be retired from your rotation. Some studies have shown the decrease in energy consumption over 200 miles of use. But again, they're not all forms are created equal. And it's also going to depend on the runner and how they're actually like where everybody is different in terms of like how they start to degrade a shoe. Like you'll start to see wear and tear on different parts of the shoe based on how their foot lands on the ground and how it pronates and all that sort of thing. It does depend per person, but really a good rule of thumb. And this is not just for super shoes. This is really kind of for any shoe, but especially super shoes because you can really feel it a lot in a carbon plated shoe. But a good rule of thumb to pay attention to is how they feel and if they start to feel flat and less bouncy. So when I put my shoes on, like I said, I describe it as pogo sticks. And if you start to feel just that less of that bounce, then you might start to be able to say, okay, I think these are starting to die. um,
Mhm.
Another thing to look for is if you start to feel aches and pains, like just like these little dull things that start to come about. Again, this is something that I do for all of my shoes, not just my carbon plated shoes, because this is something that always starts like my knees always start to get achy when it's time for me to retire my shoes. And it's like, I know it. Like I know what it is. Like, and I'm like, okay, this isn't an onset injury. This is just I need new
Mhm.
shoes now. So you
Yeah,
can kind of
yeah.
start to pay attention to those and don't track your mileage. Be like, okay, I'm at 100. These are done because they may not be, or they might be done sooner. It's like everybody is different. There
Mhm.
really isn't a magic number. But for
Yeah.
you, Toni, because you have more miles put in on super shoes than I have, I think, because I wasn't really using them until like this year, really.
Mhm.
What's the mileage that you've had to hang up your shoes on?
So I always stuck to around the like 1 to 150. Like I wouldn't put on more than probably like around 30 to 40 miles on my shoes going into race day. I really tried to not exceed that because back then when I was wearing them, I'm someone that was like, I thought that 100 was the number, but I still think I like to stay around there even if I get more out of them just because again, I want them to be in their prime when it comes to like that pop that you're getting. I don't want it to be like,
Yeah.
oh, I've worn them like to the point where one, I've worn them too much in training, but also I've worn them to the point where it's like, oh, it's just like a little less than where I want them. So that's just like a personal preference thing.
Mhm.
But I would say I think like I would say 1 to 150 is good. And again, it depends on the shoe. So I feel like the Saucony Endorphin Pro lasted me a really long time. And that was one that I did like when I wore them in training, like I felt like that did last longer. I didn't wear the Elite enough to get a lot of use out of it. I like for 1 to 2 years, I guess a year and a half, like I used the Vapor Flies, and I thought that those are the ones that probably wore out the quickest at the time. But since then, they've made the
Mm.
updates, which is the version that you have, and I think that the shoe, like they've added more to the shoe to make it more stable. And so people were kind of complaining at first about the Alpha Fly in particular. I think even the Vapor Fly that it was like slightly heavier. But it's like better from like an injury risk. Like I think a lot of these companies are trying to kind of find that balance of like making them as like efficiently light as possible, while also being mindful of like, we still have to have these shoes be stable enough for people to do these endurance races, because that was the issue. I don't know if you felt that way in the old Vaporflies that you wore, but I know I felt that way with even the version that came like after yours. And it felt like it was like such an unstable shoe. Like the
Oh
base of
yeah.
the shoe was so skinny that it's like, and if you didn't
I
have
felt
like
like I was gonna
stable
fall
shit down there,
off.
yeah,
Yeah.
like tipping
Yeah.
over. Yeah. So I'm glad that they made those updates, because I think it's smarter. And I do think that with those changes, like these shoes, like I'm not surprised to hear that you can get up to maybe 200 miles, but still just like be cautious with it.
Yeah, just know
But
the
that's my
signs.
thoughts.
I think yeah, I think just knowing the signs, and I think that if you got 200 miles out of it, like, you would be on the luckier side of things. I would
Yes,
say
absolutely.
yeah, I would say that would be more of like you're on the lucky side of things. So I
Yeah,
think
for
that it's
sure.
closer to 150 or less. 1 to
Yeah,
150 I think is
I
more the
agree.
average of what people are seeing getting out of them, but
Yeah.
again, it's different
Oh,
per person, different per brand.
the last thing I'll say too is, and this was something that I'm glad that I like caught on to this, and I'm glad that I saw somebody post about this. I ordered a pair. This was on the tail end when you could still get some of the older Vaporflies, because they did have more pop than like the newer model, but again, so unstable. But I got a pair on Amazon, and they were not real Vaporflies. I put them on and like walked around, and I noticed like a little abnormality in them, where it's like the two looked a little different. And then within
What?
like a week, I remember maybe a couple weeks prior, what's her Instagram handle? Fueled by Lols or something. She talked about like Amazon, like running shoes, and she was talking about multiple brands that a lot of companies are like making like fake versions of these running shoes, and people are getting hurt in them. And so there was a couple things that were kind of
Wow.
sketchy that I noticed, and I was like, these are not like real Vaporflies. And I could just tell like and it is almost like so identical, and you have to be careful of it. But even Will,
Huh.
he went to get this like golf hat from Adidas, and he saw like the same hat that he had. He wanted them in two other colors. He's like, oh yeah, I'm going to get these. He ordered them. They came in, and he was like, these fit differently. Like they look like so similar, so identical. They fit differently. I noticed on the tag, like I remember on the tag, there's this like overlay on it, and it was like a sticker that was put on with like the barcode thing, and it looked sketchy.
Hmm.
I was like, oh yeah, this is fake, this is a fake version. So
Well, that's
just be careful.
annoying.
It is annoying,
How
but
how that's
it's kind of like
even
the companies that do dupes, like the companies that do dupes
yeah.
for these other brands, like, but they try
Yeah.
to play it off that it is the brand. Like you actually see that on. So I would highly recommend, unless it says on there that it's like coming from that manufacturer, like it's coming from Adidas, which you have to do
Yeah.
some looking, but it's there. Just be careful getting shoes on Amazon,
I
because
guess I haven't ever gotten shoes on Amazon. I usually go to Running Warehouse or I go to like an actual running store, I guess.
I wanted them for like the next weekend. Or no, like I think I wanted them for like days away. So that's why I got them.
Yeah. I for my
um
Vaporflies, I actually drove out to like the further away mall to the Dick's Sporting Goods there to like get them in person because I was like, I need to like
I
try these in person. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But interesting.
But
Good to know.
all interesting stuff. We can maybe link some of the articles that we mentioned and stuff. We can maybe share that in the show notes for people in case they're interested to like look at that stuff. But we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. Please leave a review if you did enjoy it. Let us know if there's anything else that you would like us to talk about. If you want to learn more about Relentless Runners and what we do over there, you can visit relentlessrunners.com. You can follow us over on Instagram at Relentless Runners, and Christine will also link our personal pages in the show notes. But yeah, leave us a review. Let us know how you're liking the podcast. Share it with a friend that you think would want to nerd out on the running shoes with you. And we cannot wait to see you guys next time.